If you're not on the day one shortlist, you're already losing deals. This is a topic we're going to be chatting about today on the 1% Insight. So I recently came across this report from 6 Cents that was going through basically the modern B2B buyer. And this stat is from their 2025 buyer experience report. And just like anything, when we're looking at our marketing, we want to be focusing it on the latest data that we have available to us and not making assumptions essentially of what we think is right or what we predict is happening in the market. It's always better to look at the latest research that is credited, and this was done on nearly 4,000 B2B buyers. The topic for this short episode of the 1% Insight is to essentially highlight that your pipeline and potential deals are being heavily impacted by where you show up when your B2B buyers are in that search stage, that research phase of their B2B buying journey. Here is the stat, and this is quoted from 6 Cents in their 2025 Buyer Experience Report. 95% of the time, the winning vendor is already on the day one shortlist, and 4 out of 5 are still won by the vendor on top of the shortlist prior to seller engagement. What does this mean for your B2B tech company and your B2B tech marketing strategy? Essentially, we've known for a while now that B2B buyers are preferring to engage in independent online research to essentially make their shortlist, and they're spending more of their early stages of the B2B buying journey without talking or engaging with your company. This was true in this report, and the interesting part about this is that not only are they doing independent research, that research is forming a critical part of their decision making and who they in the end opt for. So just look at this. Out of that study, 95% of the time, the winning vendor was already on that day one shortlist. So failure to not be on that shortlist essentially means that it's very unlikely that you're going to get that business. And even more importantly to that, 4 out of 5 deals were won by the vendor on the top of that shortlist. So it's important to be on the shortlist day one, but how do you get to the top of that shortlist that are being prepared by your prospects every day? This is where we need to focus our marketing efforts in terms of building that demand generation feature of your marketing department and not just focusing on short-term capturing of leads. There needs to be a balance of both. One can't work without the other. If you don't build the demand in the early stages, you won't have any leads to actually capture and close at the latter stage of their buying journey, and vice versa. There'll be no revenue if you actually don't capture those leads correctly and have a process for sales to take in quality prospects and bring them through a sales process. So both need to work, but in this regard, there will be nothing for sales to work with if you are not being discovered and being placed high up in that shortlist from day one. So even if you're getting demo requests and inbound leads and you're 3 or 4 on that shortlist, they've ranked you there. Chances are, even after going through the demo, all those resources, all that time, the deal has already been decided. These B2B buyers are consuming your content online. They're reading customer reviews. They're looking at review sites. They're looking at alternatives. They're comparing you based on features. They're trying to find different areas that will work well from them. They're trying to find content that answers their questions, depending where they are right now in that B2B buying journey. So someone might just become problem aware and need to understand the implications of perhaps not using a financial software tool to automate their bookkeeping. Whereas someone further down the B2B buyer journeys has got the answers to those questions, but they're looking at more of the implementation and how does this work? How do team members use it? So you need to be preparing content, a multi-channel approach that answer these questions. As we're recording this, we're at the end of November 2025. Planning for 2026 is already taking place. But there is an opportunity for B2B technology companies to not only focus on capturing leads, but to start optimizing for discoverability. So we know that these buyers are building their shortlists based on what they're seeing online, what they trust, and what they find credible. So we need to position your brand as one of those top vendors. So this is going to require a strategy, a deliberate content strategy that requires showing up where your buyers spend most of their time before they've even engaged your company. And that, from the latest data we have, is in online channels digitally. Here are 3 ways that you can become more discoverable to your B2B prospects in 2026. Number 1, answer the questions buyers are actually asking. There's no point in putting out irrelevant content that serves your own personal or company narratives and short-term goals. Yes, feature updates and everything like that are fantastic, and I encourage you to do that, but that can't be your whole content strategy, or posting about awards you win. They make up part of the content strategy, but it needs to go deeper than that. You have to be providing more value than just the accolades that you have internally. You need to be acting as the guide. I go back to how to build a story brand, that framework where you have to position yourself, your company, as the guide, not the center of the story. The center of the story, the hero in that story, is the prospect, is your customer. You need to treat them as so, and you need to be the guide to help them navigate through, in this case, their B2B buying journey, through relevant content that answers their questions. So they might be asking questions online, such as, how do I solve this problem? Who has solved this before? Who should I watch out for? What is the ROI of implementing this? What does implementation look like? So you need to create content that guides and teaches, not sells. This is not the place for selling, because they haven't made the buying decision just yet. So at this stage, creating content across multi-channel, because they're not just visible in one channel. They're not just on LinkedIn. They're not just on YouTube. They're not just on podcasts. They're consuming all of this. You need to be looking at explainer videos, FAQ style content, thought leadership content. So you need to be providing the latest insights in your industry and showcasing how this is applicable to your prospects. And not every B2B buyer is going to need the same answer to the question. They'll be at different stages of their B2B buying journey. So it's important that you create a broad range of content that can cater across the B2B buying journey, depending where they are in that stage, in that process. A great way of utilizing this is, we might be a bit biased because it's what we do, but video podcast for your B2B tech company. It allows you to share relevant insights, and it's not just AI copy and paste. We'll stick it on LinkedIn. It's your own original thoughts. You're building that trust and credibility because you're showing up. You're on video, you're on audio that can be used on social, your newsletters, your blogs, etc. You can host webinars doing this. They are going to find that much more valuable, because it's more difficult to create that type of content than just put a prompt into ChatGPT or Claude and get a response back and paste it back out onto the timeline. That won't move the needle, and it definitely won't build the trust that they're looking for when they're creating their shortlist. So you need to find every possible avenue that you can create that trust and credibility. And what we find work really well here at Trend 7 is building that B2B content engine, and the source of that content is through your video podcast. Become the go-to source of information within your category, and watch how you start showing up on those B2B buyers' shortlists. Tip number 2 on how you become more discoverable for your prospects going into 2026 is show up where they spend time. So buyers are everywhere across the digital landscape. They're on LinkedIn, they're on YouTube, they're on review sites, they're in LLMs doing research, they're in Slack communities, they're listening to podcasts, they're looking at newsletters. Far too many B2B brands are just focusing on one platform, for example, and all their eggs are in that one basket. But a content strategy needs to take into account everywhere a B2B buyer is spending time. So you need to be covering a multitude of channels in your strategy in 2026 to make sure that wherever they search, you are being positioned as the top vendor in your category. So whether they search on YouTube, or they search on LinkedIn, or they search for a podcast, you need to be putting the relevant keywords and the relevant content out there so that the algorithms are picking up your content and displaying it as credible and trustworthy to answer the question of the B2B buyers. And it isn't just they find you on one platform. Chances are the B2B buying journey is messy. It's not as linear as we all like to think it is. You know, they might hear you on a podcast and then they might not hear from you again. And they might see you on LinkedIn and then it goes quiet again. And then they see a review or they see a customer story and then they might go to your website then. So this consistent visibility is important, because without those actions and steps beforehand, they wouldn't have found you. So that's why the consistency is key for your content strategy going into 2026. This is a great way also, is the consistency, because it builds the familiarity among your brand and it gives that mental availability to your audience that positions you as the go-to vendor, so that trust then gets you onto that shortlist. Without that, and they don't recognize you, they don't think of you when they think of this solution, then you're at a loss, because chances are your competitor has already taken that mental availability amongst your prospects, and they will be number one on that shortlist and likely win that deal when it comes to decision making. And then lastly, number 3, create with value in mind, not just product level content. So there's a great mix to be had between, product release features. They are very important, no doubt, but you also need to balance that with thought leadership style content, how-to content, value-leading content. Focus on the problems that they want to solve and start creating content around that. So do deep research into your ICP, find out who your users are, go back to basics. What problem are you solving? What problems do they have? Where do they want to go? Start creating the content based on that. So you need to be educating that market. Some of your B2B buyers don't even know they have a problem. So you need to be educating them before that. Then when they realize they're problem aware, you need to be showing them how they can implement certain solutions, tactics, best practices to solve that problem. So you don't want to be viewed as just another B2B tech company, another software provider. You want to be a guide and a trusted authority within your niche and within your category. When that trust is built and you've provided enough value, you become the go-to choice. And they feel that when they engage with you, that they already know you in some regards because they've been consuming content for 6 months, 8 months, 12 months previously to engaging with sales. To summarize, if you want to win more deals in 2026 and beyond, you have to stop waiting for buyers to come to you and start building that trust and credibility early on in their B2B buying journey. Start earning that place on that day one shortlist by showing up consistently early in their B2B buying journey and with content that actually helps them and provides value, not just trying to get them to fill out a form straight away. Thanks for tuning in to the 1% Insight. We'll be back with another episode next week. Make sure you follow, subscribe wherever you get your podcast so you never miss an episode.